So let's start with functions in C++. So in this tutorial we will learn about what is a function and how we can make our programs more efficient by using functions. So a function, I can just give you a basic example of what a function is. So let us suppose that this is something, I call that a box. So a function is just like a box, and if you just put something in this box, or I should say if you input something in this box, this box will do some operations, and these operations can be anything. Like I've just written some symbols here, like it can add the inputs given to it, or it can divide them, or anything. But there are a lot of features that this box can do. So let's suppose that this box is a function. So when you just give any input to this box will do something and is more likely to give an output. So in mathematics, functions are also there. So let's take a simple example of a function which returns the output, or you can say which returns the cube of the input. So let's suppose this is a function box, and now we're not going to call it as a box, we will call it as a function. And let's suppose we are giving some input to this function. So let's suppose the input are the integer values. So let's suppose I give any integer value to it. For example, let's say 3. And I say that this function is a cube function. So this is a cube function which just takes an input, then it will just do this into 3. So this function takes an input and it performs something and it gives an output. So in our case, our function is just giving us the cube of the input. So we will get 27 as an answer. So let's now define functions in terms of programming languages. So to define a function, you will have to write the function name, which can be any name, and it is followed by two braces, two circular brackets, or you can say that. So this represents a function, and we have already seen this type of thing in here. You can see here that main is followed by two circular brackets. So this is a main function. So there are some things that needs to be discussed about a function. So the first thing is that if you're giving an input to the function, and if it is giving an output, then the data type of the input should be equal to the data type of the output. So if the input is integer, let's suppose this is integer, so it can give some output like integer, or it may give some other values like in float or in double. So how will a function know what type of input it should take and what type of output, or what should it return? So it returns output. So a function is just like this, and if you want to say that this function will return output of type only int, so we are going to write int before that. So this is a function which returns values in the form of int. and we will see how it returns values. So this is a cube function. Then you can see here that in these circular brackets you have to write the input. So your input goes here. So let's suppose the input is a variable, I should say a. So we will have to write the name of the variable like this. And then this function, whatever it does, should be like this in these curly braces. So whatever this function is doing, you will have to write it inside this part. So it's clear now that this int is just the data type of the returning value, and in the circular brackets you are going to write what input it takes. So you can write it here like this, and in the next line you can write here a into a into a by declaring some other value like int c equals to a cube. So this is a variable c which is holding the cube of this value. So how will you return the output of this? So you can see here that the output is c, which is the cube of the input. So this one is input and this c is output. So if you want to return a value, you have to use a keyword which is a reserved keyword, and this is known as return. And you will have to write here whatever variable you want to return. So this is a simple example of a function which takes input value as an integer format. You can see here that this is int a. Then it stores a variable. It stores the cube of that input in some other variable, and then it returns the variable c. So one important thing to note here is that the c is also an integer, and we are returning an integer, which is correct because our data type here behind this function is also of type int. So let's make it more easier by remembering some points here. Number one, you will have to first write the function prototype. And we will see here, we will see an implementation of a function, and then we will see how this all things works. So the next thing is function definition. Or you can say the function call. And the next one, the last one, is the function itself. So remember these 3 points. So let us create a program, or I should say let us implement that. We are going to implement a function. So let's see here. We are going to create a function. We are going to create a function that returns cube of a number. So it will return cube of a number. So let us now write a program. So now here I'm going to write our program. So our program will be like this: int main. So this main function is having return type int. So that is the reason why we were writing it as return 0 here. you can see here in the C line IDE, we were always writing return 0. The reason behind it is that you can see here that this main function is a special type of function, and this is not a user defined function. So there are two types of function. One is built-in functions, and another class is of user defined functions. So the user defined functions should not take a value of a built-in function. Like, you cannot create a function with a name main, because main is a special type of function, and it's basically uses that whenever you are going to execute this main.cpp file, your program will start from the main function. That's why it is main. And return type is 0 because it is not returning any value, so it will return 0. So let's try implement our program here. So what I'm just going to do here is write defined, and let's now create our function. So first of all, I'm going to write a function prototype here. So the first step is to write the function prototype. So the function prototype is nothing but we are now just writing our function prototype, which just tells us about how our functions look like. So this is a function prototype. Let me comment it. So this is our function prototype, and a function prototype ends with a semicolon. The reason why we are writing this function prototype is that we want to tell the compiler how our function looks like. So by this statement, it is clear that the function takes a single input value, which is of the form of integer, and it is returning value which is of an integer type. So this is a function prototype. So prototype means that it's just a prototype of our whole function. So it is just a way to tell the compiler what values we are taking, basically the data type of the values. And here you can see that this is the return type, return data type. So this is just a function prototype. It does nothing. The next thing we are going to do is, in the main function, our program will start from the main function. So there can be a lot of functions in your program, so it will become a confusion for our compiler, or you can say it will become a confusion at execution time, like where should our program start from. So that's why in C++ main function is the starting point of execution. So main function is the starting point. Everything that you want to do, you will have to do it in the main function. So how will our program just go to some other function? So that is to be done in this step, in the second step. This is known as function call. So function call means that you are calling a function. So in order to, if you want to call a function, let's say I want to call a function, you will not have to write its return type. You will just have to write this, the name of the function, and the parameters of the function. So let's say I want to give an input value 3, and then I will close it using this. So this is a cube function, and it basically does nothing but it calls the function, and here is the end of our int main function, which is returning 0. So this statement is known as function call. So at this point, you can see that the first step is the function prototype. So whenever you want to create a function, the first thing you need to remember is to give the function prototype. In the function prototype, there is the data type of the returning value and the data type of the input values. And in the main function, which is the starting point, you will have to call the function. So here, if you want to call a function, you will have to remember one thing. What you need to remember is that you will not write the return type. You will just write the function and you will just give the input value. So this function call will call the function. So let's now just do the actual work of a function. So we will first write the return type of the function, then the name of our function, and then we will write it like this. And here we will use these curly braces to tell the compiler that this is the body of a function. So this is the body of function. So now what I'm just going to do here is I will declare another variable and I will store the cube of the input value in this variable, and it should be of type int because I'm going to return this variable, and thus since I'm returning an int variable, I'm writing here int. So let's move on to the second step and see how this actually works. So at the execution time, the function prototype is given and the compiler will check if such function exists or not. So the compiler will check all the functions in your program, and then it will get to know that this function prototype matches this function. In the main function, which is the starting point, we are going to do the function call. In this line, we are just calling the function. So when you write this line will direct you directly to this function. And how it knows that this is the function you need to call? It's because of the function prototype. So you will just, this line will just go to this whole function, and you see this value is 3. So the value of 3 will get stored in A. This is known as copying of the parameters. So this is copying of parameters. This has become a mess here, but I will write it here, copying of parameters. Okay, so what does that mean? So the parameters are what are the input values that our function takes. So this is a parameter. There can be a lot of parameters, 1, 2, 3, etc. So at the function call, the function, when you're writing this line, you are calling the function and then you are passing this parameter to this variable. So the value of A will become 3. So if you write any other variable here, like if you write cube 4, then the variable A will have the value 4, and then it will just do the cube of that variable and store it in this variable C. So there should be no confusion in writing function. There are only 3 steps. First, write the function prototype, then call the function by giving the input value, which is the absolute value. Sometimes this value is also known as argument or arguments. So these parameters are also known as arguments. So if someone uses arguments, then you should not confuse with parameters. It's the same thing. So the first step is to write the function prototype, which we have done here. The second is to just write the function call. You should not write function definition, just the function call. So you will call the function with no, it should not have any return type, and then this argument value will get stored here in the input part of this function, and this function will return a value of C. So the next thing, the fourth thing you need to do is store this value of C, or just print or use the value returned by a function. So if this function is returning C, you can see here that it is returning C, which is the cube of our A. So when it returns a variable, this variable will get here. So this whole part will get replaced with this variable, the value of this variable. So you can see here that A equals to 3, so the value of C will be 27. So this whole thing will be replaced by 27. So this line should be like this: int D is equals to cube 3. So it should be like this, because this function is returning a value, and when it returns a value, it will just replace the function call with the value. So this is an important point here. And this value, since you can see here that this is 27, it will get stored in this value, and now you can use this value to just do anything. You can just display this value, or you can do anything with it. So this is basically our functions in C++. So there are some built-in functions, like this main function is a built-in function. There are a lot of different type of built-in functions, and we will also discuss about them in a later on we will discuss it. Next is the user defined, which we have done here. We have defined a variable, we have defined a function cube. So this is our function prototype, function call, and the function itself, we are copying the values, then we are returning the value which gets replaced by the function call, and it is getting stored in this value, and now we are just using that value. So we have just implemented function. We are giving an input to our function, and it is returning an output, and now we are using it. In the next let's see some more functions, like which are taking some different input values, and there are also functions which do not even return anything. Like there can be a function that does not return any variable, it just prints some output. So let's see such type of functions. So let's discuss about the functions which does not return a value. So we are just going to edit the cube function, and this time we are not returning any value. So let's start with our implementation. First you need to write the function prototype. Since our function is not returning anything, there is a data type void for that. So this is a reserved keyword. Void means nothing, or you can say it does represents null. So this is also a data type of, you cannot say that it is a data type, you can just say that it is a returning type of a function. So if you want to write the function prototype of such a function which is not returning anything, not returning means that it is not giving an output. So you will have to write void here, and then the name of the function, and what are the type of inputs it is taking. Remember that you do not have to write the variable name here, it's just int, because it is a function prototype. This is the function prototype. Okay, so this is the first thing. The next one is to write our main function. And in the main function, we know that it is like this. So in the main function, what we are going to do is we are going to do the function call. So let's give an input to a function. So this is a function call. So see, this time we are not declaring any other variable here. Just in the previous one we were writing d here. Now we are not writing d here because this function is not returning anything. So now we will just write return 0 because we are not, this function main is not returning anything. Then we will write the function itself. So the function does not return anything, means that we are going to write void in front of it, then cube, then the variable name. Let's suppose the variable name is c, and then the body of the function. And since it is not returning anything, we are not going to use return c. So what we will do here is we will simply display the output. We'll just write cout, and we can just do something like this, which is a simpler approach. You can see here that this is a simple approach. Instead of storing the value of c in another variable by returning it, you can directly do that. But in some cases, there are some cases where you will have to return a value to the main function so that you can perform some operation on it. So this is how you are just going to create a function that does not return any value. You can create numerous functions, and as we will move on, we will discover a lot of functions. So there are some built-in functions too. Built-in functions like they are sqrt function. So if you call sqrt function and you give this value 4 to it, it will just return a value 2. It will just square root 4, which is 2. So it will just return a value 2. This means that this function is built in. That is, you do not have to do this part. This part is already done, and this is a sqrt function. There are a lot of functions like this that are used in are used in programming. So to include these built-in functions in your program, you need header files. So header files are an important concept here. So let's go to our C line, this one. So you can see here this line. This line is hash include iostream in these arrows. So you can see here that iostream is a header file. So what is the use of header file? Basically, header file contains, I can write here, header files contains built-in functions. Built-in functions. So you can do some research on built-in functions. Like there are a lot of built-in functions in C++, just like sqrt, and if you want to include these built-in functions in your program, you will have to write a header file. And the way to write a header file is like this: hash include in all the cases, and sqrt belongs to the header file math.h. So .h means .header file. So you will have to memorize this, that sqrt function belongs to math.h. So if you are not writing this line math.h, this function will not run. The compiler will give an error. So this is the use of header files, and in this in our starting program we have seen that this is a IO stream. You can write .h here also, .h, which is also a header file, and this means IO stream means input output stream. So input output stream is the main file, and you will have to write every this line in every program of C++. So this is the built-in functions. There are a lot of built-in functions like sine in the math library. There is a sine function, and then the cos, and there are a lot of function. Even the log function is also there. So these are the built-in functions that are in the math.h library, and there are a lot of built-in functions that you can discover on your own. I will just end our conversation of this built-in functions here, but you can do your own research, and in the further tutorials we are also going to discover some more built-in functions and also their header files. So this is how our functions look like. These are the built-in functions, and this is a user defined function, and you need to remember only 3 things about a function. First, write the prototype, then call it, and then define it. Simple. In this way you will be able to write a function, and if this concept is not clear to you, let's implement this in our IDE and see how it works. So here you can see here that I'm going to implement that. So first thing that we need to do is we are going to write the function prototype. So function prototype is, I'm just going to write the return type, the name, and the parameter our function is taking. So let us now work on something different. We are not going to write this cube. We will use some other function like multiply. So this multiply function will take 2 integer values, and it will give the multiplication of those values in the output. So since it will take 2 values, I will write 2 parameters here. So they should be separated using this comma. So this is our function. Sorry, this is function prototype. And since this is a function prototype, we are not going to write the variable name here. In the main function, what I'm just going to do is I'm just going to write the function name, and I will just give the values to it. Let's suppose 2, 3. So you can see here that our ID is saying that this function matches with this function prototype, and the value should be of type int. So if you are here, it's say int, and you can see here this should be ended with a semicolon, and this is our function call. Simple. And now since we have just written the prototype and the function call, now we need to pass this arguments to our function. So let's now write our function. So since I don't want to return anything, so let's make it a void function, because I want to make it simpler. I don't want this function to return anything, because I can just display the output here. So I will write our function like this, void multiply, and we know that these values will be passed to this. So these values will be copied to the variables which will be here. So I will have to write 2 variables here. So A will have the value 2 and B will have the value 3. So this should match with this. Then we are going to write the function body. So we know that function body is, since we are not returning anything, I will just write the output A into B. So this is our simple program of multiplication. So we will run it and it will just display the output, or it will just multiply the two values given to it. So let's write some more functions like multiply, or you can write the same function with different values like 3, 6, and so on. You can write as many you want. So let's now run it and see what will be the output. So you can see here, this is our output, 6 and 18, which is the answer. 2 into 3 6, 6 into 3 18. So if you want to separate this, if you want to write this in different line, you can use this reserved keyword end L. So end L is just a end line, and it will just format our output in the next line. So let's now see the output here. So you can see here now it is in different line. So this is a basically simple function. We are going to write some more complicated function further, but for the basics, this is all. So one thing is that these are known as the default arguments. So you will have to write it like these are the default arguments. So this is our function. So let's say I want to return something. Now let's do this part also. Now let's say I want to return, this function is going to return something. So I will store the value here, and I'm just going to return the value of C. And remember that this part will get replaced with this. So I need to write this. So the value that the function is returning will get replaced by this, and you can see here that it will be 6. So the value will be 6. So I'm going to write D here. So let's now run it. So you can see here that the value is 6. So you can do either way, but in this way of returning, you can use this variable for other purposes too in the main function. So that is the main benefit of returning a value from a function. So if you want to use this output in your main function, let's suppose I want to say I want to write D, or I will declare some other variable n, and this n will have the value D plus 2, cout n. So in this case we need to get this value D. So this returning is useful in this case. It will become more clearer when we will use some more functions. So function is an important topic, and we have discussed all the main important things, and if we have missed something, we will cover it in further tutorial. The next part of the functions, so this is the part 1, and then in the next part, that is part 2, we will discuss two methods of passing arguments, and that is call by value and call by reference.